All right, all right. I just want to say good evening. Thank you, everybody, for your patience and good evening. I'm Professor Berry. I'm going to be with you for the New Testament course this semester. So I want to say welcome. Thank you for your prayers and everything while I was out last week. Today, so that we get caught up, I just want to remind, mostly everybody did it, I think just one student, please make sure that you do the discussion post from week one. This week, we're on week two, so we're in Mark. So we're going to cover today. I'm gonna cover what we would have did last week, what is the New Testament, and I'm gonna see if I can push through and do Mark tonight. All right. Please make sure that you do your discussion post for week two. This is this week, okay? And engage with your classmates. Because we don't see each other, so make sure you engage with your classmates. Review your syllabus. Make sure you review your syllabus for each week and make sure you see your grading. Good evening. All right, come on, just mute you real quick. All right, and make sure you review your syllabus. Let me know if you have any questions, but we're just simply going to go week by week. Let's take care of each week at a time. Like we said, all right, I'm gonna put everybody on mute real quick and we're gonna come right back.
You're good.
Okay. Hey there, Ileana. I'm gonna put you on mute, okay? And put you on mute. We're gonna come right back. Okay, and make sure that you review your syllabus. Make sure that you review the book. So you should have the New Testament textbook, and I apologize. Make sure that you get that. The name is escaping me right now. And then second thing that I want you to do is, if you were not able to get the book just yet, if you look in week one, I was able to copy a few pages because of copyright laws. I can't get everything, but I was able to copy a few pages for you to start some reading. Okay. So let me just pause for a second. I want to say good evening, Teresa, and tell me who's right here. Is it Eliana? Okay. Just might be able to talk a little bit later. All right, everybody. So what we're going to do tonight is go ahead and jump into what we would have done last week, which is what is the New Testament. What this is chapter 1 in your textbook. Okay. And make sure if you have any questions, just stop me or you can drop it in the chat.
It's Ashley, not Ilana.
Hi, Ashley. How are you? Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm glad that you joined us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, we're going to jump on into our chapter 1. We're going to talk about this is an introduction. And once again, if you're watching the video, if you're not able to make it tonight, it's okay. But I want you to make sure you go back to week 1 and there is a video you'll see from Professor Amer, Dr. Margaret Amer. And she was my New Testament professor when I was in seminary, and she is fabulous. She is so fabulous. If you have not watched that video, please watch it and watch it again and again. Okay. So make sure you watch that intro video in week 1 from Dr. Margaret Amer. All right, here are just a few introductory things. I do want you to familiarize yourself with the New Testament books. You don't have to memorize them, but even if you just flip through, even if you have a Bible on your computer or on your phone, okay, I want you to just familiarize yourself with the New Testament books. Old Testament. All right, look right there on the screen. I've been talking all day during the training, so I'm sorry I might sound a little funny. All right, Old Testament. Tell me how many books Old Testament has. Y'all can unmute now. You can unmute your microphones. How many books does Old Testament have?
39.
39. And the Old Testament was written when, Teresa?
Before Jesus was born.
There you go. Now, the Bible is broken into 2 parts. So we have the New Testament All right. And the New Testament has how many books?
27.
27. And this was written when, Teresa?
After Jesus was born.
All right. So we have really like basically you see this illustration of the book of the Bible, right? And in the middle, I just want you to imagine in the middle of the Bible is Jesus, right? In the middle is Jesus. So Jesus is like our bookmark. And I want you to think of like, okay, I have my book, and then in the middle of the book is Jesus, because Jesus is kind of like we'll call Jesus like the bookmark, the divider between the Old and the New Testament. Okay, so in the New Testament, which we're concerned about tonight, is when Jesus comes on the scene. Jesus is born, and he is a Jew, and we start this new thing, this new movement in the New Testament is really, I have to tell you that the New Testament is, excuse me, is one of my favorite courses to teach. As I was saying earlier, I love to teach it in the spring because we're currently in the season of Lent. We are going to be celebrating Resurrection Day in April. And then you have Passover that's coming. So a lot of the things that that we're going to be reading about, okay, are going to be kind of happening in this season. One of the interesting things as well as the Old Testament. The Old Testament has a lot of authors. And the thing about the Old Testament that makes it a little tricky is because it's just that it's very, very old. We sometimes know the authors, and sometimes because it's so antiquated, we don't know the authors. New Testament was written, you'll see it down there. It's kind of written between about 50 to 120 CE. CE means common era. And it was easier for us, for researchers to understand who wrote what. It was much easier because it's not like they had computers or typewriters and things like that in the New Testament as opposed to the Old, but things were a little bit better with assuming the correct authors. So we are much better with attributing authorship in the New Testament as opposed to the Old Testament. Hey there, Kayla. Good to see you tonight.
Hello, sorry for my tardiness. I was cooking.
No, cook us something good. I didn't feel like cooking. We're gonna put in a pizza over here.
I should have done that.
I
Hey,
know.
everybody.
I'm tired. How you doing? So I want you to also understand there are about 15, 16 different authors in the New Testament. But the key thing that they're writing to Christians. In the Old Testament, a lot of the writings were, of course, to the Israelite people or people of Jewish heritage, right? And so those individuals come over to the New Testament. Jesus comes on the scene. Remember, Jesus is like our bookmark, right? Jesus comes on the scene. Jesus was a Jew, but then it says, hey, I've got this new way for you to live. And let's keep moving. Let's talk a little bit more about the New Testament, okay? And let's see, Teresa, if you don't mind, can you read that information? Can you see it in the pinkish?
Okay. The Christian Bible developed over time. The entire Bible, as we know it today, is called the canon. Jews believed in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and some of the books of the prophets. Jesus quoted some of these scriptures too. By the 2nd century, some Christians ascribed authority to the words of Jesus Christ. The New Testament emerges out of conflicts. And how do we say his name?
I'm sorry.
Athanasius.
Athanasius.
Athanasius is credited with coming up with the first list of the 27 New Testament books.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. So what I want you to understand is remember the people that we read about in the New Testament didn't have the New Testament. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have it. So they didn't have the book because they were living it out. They were living it out. And so what they did have was Old Testament. Okay. So I want you to understand, like when we read about these people in the New Testament, it wasn't like they could pick up the book of Mark and they're like, oh, there we are right there. They were living it out, and and then later on this information was captured. All right. Oops. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the book of Mark a little bit later. I'm watching my time here, but I want you to understand, and y'all stop me if anything is not clear. We're going to find various type of books in the New Testament, but what I want you to understand that although we have gospels, we're going to have apocalyptic literature, which is like Revelation, they all stand in harmony with one another. What does that mean to you? They all stand in harmony.
They're all connected.
They're connected. They're connected. And they speak of, even if the writer said it a different way, even if the writer wrote about the same story, but they added something different, they all stand to share the same message about Jesus. They all share the same message about living. No one book is going to be in contrary to another book. Okay. Now, when I tell students, when we come to the New Testament class, I want you to, even though all of the books are related and they are going to flow in harmony, like we said, right? They're not going to speak contrary. Like one book's going to say this and another book says something different. Okay. However, I want you to, when you read the books, you're going to read each book separately, and you want to interpret each book separately. So you're going to be like, okay, well, John says this about Jesus, while Mark says this. Okay. We are going to find lots of similarities, especially in the Gospels, or Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You're going to find similarities, but guess what? You are going to find some differences. Okay. And why do you think some of the books might be different?
I think because everyone wasn't there. Some of it is based upon
Right.
maybe what they heard, what they were told,
Right.
what they witnessed.
There you go. And I want you to, as you go from this course, I want you to understand that. So I see Teresa, and it was Ashley and Kayla and myself, right? If we all were out here on the street and we witnessed a car crash, okay? Teresa's gonna have a story of the car crash. I'm gonna have a story of the car crash. Ashley has one perspective. Kayla has another perspective. And we all write it down. We all can agree that it was a car crash, right? We all can probably agree it was on this street. It was at this time. It was a green car and a red car, right? But maybe from the way Teresa was standing, she saw how it came from the back. I might have been standing another way and I saw how it came from the front. Ashley saw it from the side, okay? And that's how I want you to interpret things when we start looking at the different gospels, because Matthew and Mark, Luke and John, they're all going to talk about Jesus, but they talk about him from maybe a firsthand knowledge way. right? They may talk about him in a way because they borrowed stories from somebody else. Okay, y'all stop me if anything is confusing, okay?
Okay.
All right. All right, everybody, let's talk about the scribes. What's a scribe?
Kind of like a secretary or something, a note taker.
The note taker. So the scribe was responsible for writing the letters or writing down this information for the writer. Okay, so Matthew or Mark, Luke, Paul wrote some of the letters, which we call epistles. Okay, so they were helpers, and we're glad for the scribes because we got the New Testament, but we also have to let the scribes off because they were human. What did the scribes do? I said scribes, older scribes. What did the scribes do? Somebody read those 4 bullets on the right.
Well, I'll do it. Misspelled words, left out words, lines, or pages, copied the same words or lines twice, added a verse or line to a story to improve the text.
And we're going to talk about that tonight. So sometimes when we read New Testament scriptures, we may see a line up here and it said the same thing as another line. Well, sometimes that comes because, remember now, they didn't have Dells and they didn't have Macs and they even didn't have great pieces of paper. And I'm getting ready to pick up like a notebook. Like, like we can just go to the dollar store and get a notebook and a pen and a pencil and sharpen the pencil. They didn't have all of that. And so if you see even in this antiquated picture of even using ink and papyrus and scrolls to write with. So the instruments that they wrote with were much better than the Old Testament. Look, y'all, they still made mistakes. So they didn't have like erasers to, oh, let me take that off. They didn't have whiteout. They couldn't put some tape over it. So there were mistakes that were made, and they also tried to clean things up. So if they were like, oh, he's telling this story and he left the story off, let me go on and fill in because I know what happened. Okay. Yeah, I want to show you an example. I want to show you an example of a change that a scribe did. And I'm going to actually pull this up on the screen, but if you want to look at this later, you can always do so. And we're going to go to Mark chapter 16. So y'all stay right there. I'm going to show it to you on the screen. And we're going to go to verse 8. Now, some of the most ancient authorities bring the book to a close at verse 8. One authority concludes the book with a shorter ending, and others include the shorter ending, and then they give more detail in verses 9 through 20. I'm going to show it to you in just one second. Okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, so we're going to go to Mark 16 and 8. And I'm going to pull it up on our screen. And if you want to read it later on, that would be great. All right. So I'm going to come right back to you. And I want you to see something here. Many times, ladies, when we read, okay, hopefully you can see my screen. Many times, ladies, when we read, okay, see right here? Y'all see my screen? It says Mark
Yes.
16:8. Okay, and I'm gonna push this right here. Many times when we read, we don't really pay attention to these little subscripts. Okay, so when you start reading now, I want you to pay attention to these little subscripts that tell additional information about the scripture. So for example, let's go back up and let's figure out what's going on. And Kayla, are you able to read, or Ashley? Anybody want to read I apologize, Mark 16, and we're gonna go 1 through 8.
Okay, yes, I can read it.
Okay.
Jesus has risen. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid.
Boom. Thank you. And it ends. So this is an example of a scribe. And a scribe is like, oh my goodness, you stopped it right here, right? So the earliest manuscripts of this New Testament scripture stopped at verse 8. So a scribe got to it, right? And scribe said, hold up, I heard about what happened, right? And the scribe's like, let me add on to this story, because if we leave the people hanging, let's just stop right there. What if they left us hanging right there? That would have been wild. We don't get the rest of the story.
Mm.
Okay. Now, verses 9 through 20 finish the story. And we got time, it's 7:30. Go ahead. Anybody want to finish the story? And look at how this scribe finished verses 9 through 20.
When Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had driven 7 demons. She went and told those who had been with him and who were mourning and weeping. When they heard that Jesus was alive and that she had seen him, they did not believe it. Afterward, Jesus appeared in a different form to 2 of them while they were walking in the country. These returned and reported it to the rest, but they did not believe them either. Later, Jesus appeared to the 11 as they were eating. He rebuked them for their lack of faith and their stubborn refusal to believe those who had seen him after he had risen. He said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons. They will speak in new tongues. They will pick up snakes with their hands. And when they drink deadly poison, it will not hurt them at all. They will place their hands on sick people, and they will get well." After the Lord Jesus had spoken to them, he was taken up into heaven, and he sat at the right hand of God. Then the disciples went out and preached everywhere, and the Lord worked with them and confirmed his word by the signs that accompanied it.
Now look at this scribe. So when you read this, or if you tell your friends, when you see verses 9 through 20, and especially as we're going into Easter, but we would call it Resurrection Day, right? Verses 9 through 20 just really just set it off. So the scribe this is an example where the scribe said, hold up, you have an incomplete story. Let me finish this story, and I don't want to say make it glorious, but because it wasn't like they were making it up, but it really was even more powerful when the scribe added 9 through 20. That makes sense?
It does.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if they would have stopped, I'm gonna transition real quick. If they would have just stopped at verse 8, it would have been like, okay, well, what happened next? You saw Jesus and what? But then we got even more confirmation from Jesus. They had more discussion from Jesus. There is a mandate to them to go out and spread the word. And he also rebukes them for not having faith.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Now stay right there. And this is a good segue as we're going to go back into Mark. And please forgive me, I'm going to try to move fast so I get everything in tonight. And you ask me if there's any questions. Okay, I'm coming right back to you. I'm going to change my screen. Oh, y'all can't see me. Here we go. All right, let me know when you can see Mark on the screen.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to move ahead a little bit in the book, and we're going to talk about the gospel according to Mark. So you're going to find that there are 4 gospels. There's Matthew, there's Mark, there's Luke, and there's John. So we're going to start off with those 4, with those 4 gospels. Now, what I want to tell you is, let's go up here. What I want to tell you is, with those 4 gospels, you might want to jot this down: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We've got 3 that are called synoptic gospels. What does synoptic mean? Y'all can look on the right-hand side. What's synoptic mean?
Seeing all together.
Seeing all together. And it's also translated as seeing with one eye, right? So Matthew, Mark, and Luke, excuse me, many of those stories are very similar. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, okay? John, however, still talks about Jesus, but his stories are different. He comes from a whole different, a different spin. Okay? A different spin. So let's review. What are the 3 synoptic gospels?
Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
All right. Who's not synoptic?
John.
John. John's by himself because he tells different stories about Jesus. He's still talking about Jesus, but he just tells different stories. Okay. And that's one of the cool things about John. All right. Now I want to talk to you about this thing called the synoptic problem. The synoptic problem. And that means, make sure that you get this, even if you have to go back over this video. The synoptic problem means Matthew, Mark, and Luke are very similar. They tell some of the same stories. However, some of their stories will disagree. And what I mean by disagree, I think I've got some examples there for you, like with the Christmas story. Well, should I say the birth of Jesus? I won't say Christmas. The birth of Jesus. Like one says about the wise men, right? And then there's another story about the shepherds. Okay. That's where we mean the disagreements. All of them talk about Jesus. All of them said he was born, right? So we're not saying they disagreed on that level, but there are going to be certain things in their stories that may disagree, and we'll talk about the reasons why, because sometimes they're pulling information from different sources. All right, y'all. Ladies, tell me, who was the first gospel? Which one was written first? Matthew, Mark, or Luke?
Mark.
Mark. Mark. Mark was written first. Somebody tell me, if you open up a Bible, who's first in the New Testament?
Matthew.
Matthew. And so a lot of people think you just open it up and it's chronological order. Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily. But Mark was the first one written. And what happens is Matthew and Luke, because Mark was first, they went and grabbed information from his book and they put it in their books. Okay. So Matt and Luke have some passages also that are not in Mark because they got their stuff from somewhere else. Now we're going to talk about Q or quail because I want to show you this. Let's look at this graphic and it can make it really easy. And what, ladies, what I want you to do, if you're on a computer or your tablet or your phone, it really helps if you move your finger along the arrows. Okay. All right. Let's go to the top. Let's go to the pink. Look at Mark. Mark was written first. Who came and got information from Mark? Look at the arrows.
Matthew and Luke.
Very good. Okay. Now, let's go to Matthew. Go down to the purple.
Mhm.
Where did Matthew get his information from? Look at the arrows.
He got his from some other source.
Which is called Q or quail.
Q. hmm
Mhm. So Matt got information from Q. Who else?
Who else got message from Luke?
Oh, no, wait, I'm sorry. Let's deal with Matt first. Let's deal with
Okay.
Matthew first. Okay, look at Matthew, the purple. Look at the
Okay.
arrows going to Matt. Where did Matthew get his information from?
Oh, he got some from Mark
Yes, Mark,
and
Q,
from Q.
and
Oh, he got some from somewhere else.
look at the purple.
Okay, I
Let
see
me
the
see if
I see the M from his outside source.
there you go. Right here, can you see me
Mhm.
moving on the screen?
I see it.
All right. So Matt, let's deal with Matt now. Matt got information from his own source. Let's say he had his own people. He had his own CNN. Okay. He had his own material. Then Matt also got information from Mark. Matt also got information from Q, and we call it Q, but it's called Quail. And Quail was just another source. We're not exactly sure like the who, but they got it from this other source. We'll say this other book or this other person. Okay. All right. Now let's go over to the yellow, to Luke. Where did Luke get his information from?
From Mark,
Uh-huh.
from the Q, his outside source, and then his other source, the
And his
L.
other source is called L. And when we say L, that was other information that only Luke had. Like Matt had other information that only Matt had. Okay. What we call the synoptic problem. The synoptic problem, because we have these different sources. We got L, we have M, we have Q, and we have Mark. Okay. So remember who was written first. And they came and got, there you go. Because Mark was first. They came and got information from Mark since Mark already existed. And then Matt and Luke might have been saying, hey, you know what? But he doesn't have this in here. I'm gonna go and do some research and I'm gonna put that in my book. Okay. All right. Let's go back to Mark. All right. All right. One of my ladies, go ahead and read what's on the left-hand side. Left-hand side. What's up with Mark?
Okay. Mark, the earliest gospel. We don't know the exact author, but the book is attributed to Mark. The author spoke Greek and probably lived outside of Palestine.
Mhm.
Mark sees Jesus as the Messiah, the Son of God. This is the point that the author is trying to prove by writing this book.
Awesome. So, Mark's the first gospel. And many times I want you to understand that when they're writing these books, they're writing for a reason. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are really pushing the point of who Jesus is. Okay. And they're writing to Christian people sometimes. They're writing to also to Jewish believers at the time as well. And also, you know, when they're writing to them, many times they're writing to them and saying, hey, you know, y'all missed it because you thought Jesus wasn't the Messiah. Well, let me write this book to prove to you that he was. So once again, this book is attributed to Mark. Sometimes it's not like today, and you can pick up a book, like I got a book over here, and I can see the name of the author. I know who wrote it, you know, but it's attributed to Mark. So we have a lot of information that kind of points the arrows back to this individual. But he definitely sees Jesus, and all of them do see Jesus as Messiah, and they're trying to prove the point that the people missed it. Okay, and I'm gonna take a look at Matthew 1:1 in the beginning. Okay, all right, let's go right here. And I love books and I love pictures, so that's why I love to give you some awesome artwork, biblical artwork as well. Okay, so in Matthew's gospel, remember y'all, he's trying to paint the picture about Jesus. He wants these Jewish people to know, he uses the word Messiah. He is the Messiah. He wants them to understand who Jesus is. But the Jewish people didn't always recognize the word or the name, excuse me, Christ. So they do recognize the name or title Messiah. So he uses that so they understand that term much better. When we talk about authorship, the writer wants to understand the audience. That makes sense? And if he can write in the lingo and the language that they understand so they get the message, by all means. So that's the reason why we'll see certain words more than others. So I'm going to go to that example. Okay, we're doing pretty good. Let's go to that example in Mark chapter 1, verse 1. Stay with me. I'm going to bring this up on the screen. Let me know if anything is confusing. All right, I'm coming right back to you. Now remember, we're in Mark chapter 1. What did we say? Who was written first?
Who was written? Mark?
Mark was written first, right?
Yes.
There you go. All right. All right. One of my ladies, I want you to read just the first verse. Kayla, go ahead. Kayla, go ahead.
Okay. John the Baptist prepares the way, the beginning of the good news about Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God.
All right. Stop right there. What did I just say? The author Mark is writing to a Jewish people. And what term did he use to describe Jesus?
the Messiah.
There you go. There you go. Oh, something else I want to point out to you. Ladies, did Mark start off with Jesus in the manger as a baby?
No.
No. Because right here he's getting ready to talk about John the Baptist. We move on down. Jesus is fully grown right here. Verse 16, he's calling the first disciples. So he's grown. This isn't little baby Jesus in the manger. This isn't a Christmas story, is it?
No.
No. So there we already see a difference with Mark. Mark was the first book, and watch it, ladies. Mark didn't have the birth story. Mark didn't have Mary on the donkey in the manger. Y'all know. Didn't find any room in the inn. That story is not in here. And he was the first one. So let me just pause. Let's pause. Talk to me. What you think Matt and Luke were thinking when they read this?
They probably were shocked.
Teresa said they were shocked.
Because it was the first gospel written, but it doesn't start off at the beginning of his birth. It starts with him being an adult. So what happened before then?
Right. In Matthew, and Matthew has the birth narrative. We got Mary and Joseph, they were getting married and so on and so forth. We have it there. Okay. We have it there. So I just wanted you to see that Luke. And Luke does as well. Yeah. Luke has the birth story in there as well. Okay. So I want you to see that with your own eyes. So let's go back to Mark. Mark was the first book written in the New Testament. First gospel, right? But Mark didn't have the birth story. Jesus is fully grown. He's baptized. He's getting ready to be tested in the wilderness. He's about to start his earthly ministry. That's where we're going here. And probably Matthew and Luke were like, oh, hold on. He came from this part. How about we write another book and we add some of his part, but we're going to do some research and figure out how was he born. Let's go get that story. Okay. Stay right there. Let's see where we are. Coming right back to you. Oh, if we don't finish all this tonight, we'll finish next week. But this is good. This is gonna be good stuff. All right. A little bit more about Mark's gospel. Oh, we just said this. That God, it doesn't begin with Jesus as a baby. He's grown. It starts off with him being baptized. Jesus like hits the ground running in Mark. It's not baby Jesus, it's I got work to do. Okay. Another thing I want you to recognize, and this is on page 63 in your textbook. Another thing, ladies, that I want you to recognize is that there were other men called Jesus. Okay, so think of a name like a John, Michael, Brian, Sean. There were other men named Jesus. However, Mark really wants to distinguish who Jesus Christ is. And he also wants to make sure that when we call, okay, let me go back up here. I'm talking too fast. There were other men at the time that were also called Son of God, and they also might have did miraculous things, right? But Mark is really trying to distinguish, this is who this Jesus is. Okay. He tries to prove that Jesus has authority to teach, Jesus has authority to heal, that this is an individual that we have to listen to because of his divine nature. All right. Couple things we're going to do right here, and I know we're pressing for time. Let's talk about opposition in the Gospel of Mark and how Jesus was often misunderstood by the people around him. Okay, so we're going to go to Mark 2 real quick, and we're going to see how the Jewish leaders just really they didn't like Jesus. They didn't understand him. They saw him as a threat to what they were practicing. They saw him as being powerful, right? And they didn't like it. They really didn't like it, and they were just very jealous of him. So that every time you see Jesus moving with the disciples, performing miracles and healings, always after it, there's some type of opposition. He heals somebody. Well, why are you healing them on a Sunday? You know, there's always some type of opposition that the Jewish leaders have with him. Okay, so he's very much misunderstood, especially by the individuals that he hangs with. Let's go to Mark 2, and then we're going to go to Mark 8 real quick. Let's see. If we can't finish all this, we'll finish this last piece next week. Let's go to Mark 2, and let's see how he was misunderstood. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna come right back to you. Let's read this. Let me see if I can highlight it here. All right. So we're talking about how he was misunderstood. Let me see if I can highlight that. All right. We're talking about being misunderstood. Jesus is healing somebody, okay, doing an awesome thing. And let me see, one of my ladies, whoever feels led, go ahead and you can read what I have highlighted right there in the blue.
Jesus forgives and heals a paralyzed man. A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. They gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. Some men came, bringing to him a paralyzed man carried by 4 of them. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it and then lowered the mat the man was lying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven."
Thank you, Kayla. Teresa, you want to
Yes.
do 6 and 7?
Now, some teachers of the law were sitting there, thinking to themselves, why does this fellow talk like that? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?
All right. So let's pause for a second. All right. So anybody, Teresa or Ashley or Kayla, can you see the misunderstanding there? How he was misunderstood, how Jesus was misunderstood?
I think he's misunderstood because they misunderstand. Um, I think they were trying to go by the letter of the law.
Uh-huh. Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Very much so. They wanted to go by the T. And right here, I know we're getting towards the end, verse 8, immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that this was what what they were thinking in their hearts. And he said to them, why are you thinking these things? Which is easier to say to this paralyzed man, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up, take your mat and walk. Now remember we were talking about titles, verse 10, but I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. So Mark in his writing wants to make sure he uses certain words to convey to his audience that Jesus is the Messiah. Yes, Jesus can do these miracles. Excuse me. However, Jesus has the authority to forgive sins and is the Messiah. So he continues to show these stories in his book. But as he shows the stories, he's painting the picture that this is the Son of Man or Son of God. All right. Misunderstood. Let me go to 8 and 27, and then we're gonna pause right here. Jesus misunderstood. Let me see here. Let me see. I think that was the wrong one.
He heals the blind man.
Yeah.
Bethesda. These here.
Thought I had another example of being misunderstood. Okay. 8:27. I'm sorry. Okay, 8 and 27. My bad. Jesus and his disciples went to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, who do people say I am? So there's this whole what's the word? Misunderstanding of his identity. So in verse 28, some of the disciples say, well, some of them are saying you John the Baptist. Some of them are saying that you're Elijah the prophet from the Old Testament, like come back again. And Mark really truly paints the picture in this discussion where he says, Peter answered, you are the Messiah. So we have that repeated again in the Gospel of Mark, that title, that word is very important to the Jewish people. Messiah, they understand that word, right? So let me just pause right here. Jesus was misunderstood for the people he hung out with. So he hung out with who do you think he hung out with? Who do you like to hang out with?
Them sinners and what pelicans and the disenfranchised and the
Exactly.
marginalized and
Exactly.
the lowly folk.
The lowly folk, the individuals who had health problems, who were lame, who were blind, women, okay. But that also tied into the misunderstanding of who Jesus was. And so Mark took it upon himself as, let me set the record straight. Let me tell you who he is, because evidently y'all missed it. Okay. Y'all missed it. Okay. All right. I said I wasn't gonna hold you back for an hour. It's 8:01. So let's do this. I missed one part of that PowerPoint, and I'm going to come back to it next week. However, I want you to, and everybody, if you weren't able to make it tonight, I want you to review the PowerPoint that we did tonight on Mark. Take some time and flip through, even in your reading, but even take some time and flip through the Gospel of Mark in your Bible, or even if you just find it online. BibleGateway.net is easy. You may find the app on your phone. Flip through some of the stories. Look at Mark's wording of how Mark paints the picture of Jesus. Okay, we'll get to Matthew, we'll get to Luke later, we'll get to John. Okay, but I want you to just kind of flip through and look at some of those stories, because if excuse me, I keep getting it messed up. If Mark was first, right? We want to look and see what did Mark put in his book. And then as we get to Matt and to Luke a little bit later, we're going to see how they pulled stories from Mark and then added on sometimes as well. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Was that a lot? Did I wear you out?
No.
No.
All right, Teresa and Ashley, Kayla, and to our students who are watching, thank you so much for your time. Once again, thank you so much for your prayers last week in our travel for the funeral of my aunt. Now, this week, make sure that you complete your discussion post. Make sure you engage with your classmates. And remember, that will be due everything. I try to make everything due Sunday night. Okay, so we open on Mondays. We start a new week on Mondays, and we end on Sunday night at 11:59. That makes it easy for you and me. All right. Okay, everybody. Oh, got my thing going on my face. Take care. I hope that you have a great evening.
Okay, everybody as well. Good night.
Good night,
Peace and
everybody.
blessings. Okay.